Good morning. I have the go-ahead from Stephanie that I should start. I'm here with my colleagues from the other zoo and aquarium regional associations. I'm Chris Veers with the Association of Zoos and Aquariums based here in the United States. And our topic this morning is advancing animal welfare through association standards and accreditation. We have two different panels, and we will have the opportunity to visit with each one of them separately. Our first panel this morning is Susan Hunt with the Perth Zoo and Waza Council, Nicholas de Graaf of the Zoo and Aquarium Association in Australasia, Mafanwe Griffith with the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and Kusimi Nakakura with the Japanese Association of Zoos and Aquariums. I will introduce our second panel when they are on stage. I want to set the framework just a little bit and give you a definition of accreditation. So accreditation is an assessment process using experts in a particular field to identify standards of acceptable operation and performance and to measure compliance with them. I believe when we think of accreditation, we all think of it as a snapshot in time. It's an evolution. Some of the regional zoo associations that will talk to you this morning, they have had accreditation programs going on for quite some time. Others are in the development stage, but each one has continued to change and improve their accreditation program as we learn more about animal welfare science. So I like to think of accreditation programs as a continuum, and I can tell you that each one of these programs incorporates animal welfare and animal welfare standards in one way or another, kind of each with its own regional or association personality. And I'd also like to put out there, I believe all of us would agree there is always room for improvement in any one of these accreditation processes. So accreditation is based on two different kinds of standards. There are performance standards. That's the most common and effective measurement used in the majority of accreditation processes. It allows for variation and different methods of achieving a desired goal. The second kind of standard in accreditation is an engineering standard. That's most commonly used in construction, manufacturing, education curriculum. It does not allow for variation or different approaches to meeting the same goal. So with that, I'm going to turn to my panelists and begin with Susan and ask her, what's the role of WAZA in accreditation, and what do you think the key issues for zoos and aquariums are in accreditation? If I could ask each of my panelists about 5 minutes. I'm looking to make sure I give equal time and billing to my second panel.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I will just point out again, WAZA, I'm in an honorary role as president of WAZA. I'm in my second year, and I'm followed by Jenny Gray, will be the president from October. I'll be thrilled to hand over to my Australian colleague. I first start about WAZA role in accreditation. WAZA is not an accrediting body. That's a full stop. That is the role of our regional association colleagues. I speak from council. We've just come from a council meeting. There is a however. We are looking at our membership model. We have agreed as council, we are yet to get it through our membership, that the issue of accreditation, there is accreditation and there is accreditation. And we talked a little bit about this in relation to the US and some of the issues that you're experiencing here with what is an accredited zoo. WAZA also experiences this issue. And you'll hear from my colleagues across the world about how this is raising its head. It is all in a word, and we heard this also from the journalists this morning. WAZA is looking at a process to look at the basis of what is a good accreditation system. And this is a really important aspect for us as WAZA, as a coalition of some of the leading zoos and aquariums around the world, to be an authentic voice in animal welfare and in conservation. We need to be partners with other zoos and aquariums who share those values and be confident about that. So this, as Chris says, we are changing, we are improving. It comes very much from WASA Council and WASA members that this is a direction in which we're going. So it's a very exciting time of change. The second part of your question was what is important in accreditation. What we looked at, and my Australian colleague here will emphasise this, and we looked at what is different about zoos and aquariums that we need to accredit. We don't need to accredit ourselves as tourist facilities. We don't need to accredit, particularly in many jurisdictions, our education programs. We don't need to accredit, certainly in Australia, our occupational health and safety standards. That's heavily regulated. So what is this particular issue that zoos and aquariums need to accredit? It's welfare. So the approach that the animal welfare, the Caring for Wildlife strategy took, is to look at that absolute point of difference. It's animals. And that's what the basis, I believe, and I think that is I know that is the direction that WASA is going in our looking at accreditation systems around the world and making that determination of where we sit with our international colleagues in terms of our membership model. The welfare issue is a fundamental aspect of accreditation. Professor Fraser spoke really well this morning about the issue of welfare and other issues of how it's important. So flowing from that model where welfare is the basis of accreditation, then the basis of that accreditation, and you'll see again something that I feel passionately about, is the professionalism and expertise of our staff who work directly with the animals. And that is the basis, I believe, of how we properly assess welfare. So the accreditation model has to be partnered with, in each of our organisations, and this is getting down to the organisational level, the professionalism of our staff. And I know just in my own zoo, and I'm sure many of you on the same journey, we moved our zookeeping staff from what was a miscellaneous workers award, which is the same as cleaners in an industrial, we're in very industrial workers focus, to a professional public service award in the last 5 years. They are now professionals. They're the same, they're considered as professional as a scientific officer. It's a big difference in the way that keepers are viewed in Australasia now. And most of our keepers now, when we advertise for a job, we may get 400 applicants and they all have science degrees. So it's a very different focus. So that professionalism is very important. Now I'm going very much off the course of what is accreditation, but I'm also speaking as a CEO's perspective. But basically that is WASA's role, and I can pass on to Nicholas.
Great. Thank you. So Nick, ZAA has had an accreditation program for a number of years, but I know that you recently overhauled it entirely, and your program is it is an animal welfare based program. You've been doing it 3 years. Tell us, how does your program, in your opinion, advance animal welfare, and what have you learned in those 3 years of assessments?
Okay, thanks. So, like as you said, we had an original accreditation program which was focused not only on welfare but on other aspects that was relevant to the industry. And while that was continuing, there was a resource question over how to continue this program, and it was partially paused to sort of see how we can make it more efficient. Now, in that time, we came across the 5 domains model for assessing animal welfare. And with that discovery and the understanding of the concept of positive animal welfare, the new emerging thought of the accreditation program should be on what Susan said: let's focus on this, let's make it positive animal welfare. So when the committee received that sort of mandate from the board, there was a bit of panic. The question, of course, is how do you assess a positive experience or positive experiences in an animal? So we worked with it. we came up with a sort of an assessment method to identify the positive experiences that the animals would have. And that was our program. So how we go about that is we've identified through a series of questions. It's an interview-based assessment. We look at different aspects of or key areas that we've identified that relates to the animal's experience, and we ask the question of the carers, how do you know that the animal's having this positive experience? What's the indicators that you look for? What's the references? Where's your knowledge? How do you know? So, for example, how do you know this animal is enjoying the diet it is given? I heard mention of one of the talks earlier in the last couple of days, pleasure grumbles in gorillas. That's an indicator that the animal's enjoying its diet. Preference tests is another way to do it. And that we break it down using the 5 domains model. We've broken it down to the 4 physical functional domains, and probably I should say that our program is then established on the premise that we follow the affective states as the indicators that tell us that the animal's welfare is either good or poor. So we go through this system of asking these questions, and we score it according to the information provided and whether there is enough evidence to suggest that it's likely to be occurring. So if it's a negative issue, so that animals being frustrated or restricted in certain areas, we give it a negative score. If there's a positive or rewarding, pleasurable experience that we know based on observing the animal's behaviour, observing its condition, observing its environmental situation, we can give it a positive score. And we also have neutral. Now, a neutral is where we don't know. We can actually at least establish that it's not negative, but we have no evidence to suggest it's positive, so we've gone neutral. So it becomes a bit of a gap analysis. The process that we sort of enjoy in rolling out this program, so this program was rolled out roughly 4 years ago. It's a 3-year cycle. We just finished the first of these cycles. We're about to go into our second one. It's empowering to the member. The benchmark is the animal that the member takes care of. So we're not coming in with a preset set of standards, so to speak, to say we want to compare you against what we think is ideal. The ideal is the animal's response to how you're taking care of it. So the only way to do that is to ask the carer again, what do you understand about this individual? And we've had some really good results. The second part was, what have we learned?
Yeah, what have you learned?
Thank you. So the second, what have we learned? So we've just finished this 3-year cycle, and there's been some pretty interesting results. So the first thing is that because we can almost have a grid structure of findings between species, criteria, zoos, we can run this data, and we've got some very good profiles and trends that we can identify in terms of what it looks like across the membership, what in general the animals' experiences are within our member zoos. We've also learned something really interesting, which has been raised in a couple of other discussions the last couple of days too. Now, assessing the experience of the animal, we go, okay, this animal's got positive experiences by way of it's got a pleasurable diet, it's in a social situation where courtship, mating and rearing of young is available, and it occurs because we recognise the opportunity and utilisation of opportunity is just as important. Although we can build a picture, or what we call a story, of the animal's life experience, and by looking and scanning across all these findings, whether it's red, green or blue, we can get a general sense of the animal's overall life experience. The thing is, though, the question can come up. We've established this situation is good for this animal. The question comes up, well, how do we know it'll be like that tomorrow? How do we know that it'll be like that next week? How do we know that right now it's actually not just dumb luck? A series of fortunate events put the animal in this situation. We realised by being confronted with those questions, that's where practices has an important role to play. Practices is where we have standards, and standards tells us the organisation's capacity or potential to support the welfare of the animal. So if we assess both the experience of the animal as well as the the organisation's capacity to support the welfare of the animal, we're now having a real complete, comprehensive understanding of the animal's welfare status. Probably, yeah. That's.
I think that's great. I think that's great, and I would like to say that WASA hosted a meeting of all of its regional associations in August in Singapore. And AZA is one of the organizations that has had an accreditation program for a very long time. I have some members of my board here, my accreditation commission here, as well as fellow directors. And I can tell you that I came back and challenged them and said, boy, did I learn about a really interesting process that they're doing in ZAA, and personally challenged them to think differently about animal welfare. So I like to think that's one of the values of WASA is this network, the forum sharing, and I can't wait to learn more and steal more of your good ideas.
Thanks. Just one more thing, actually, just triggered that thought. We actually find that moment where we're talking to the keeper and we're asking that question, how do you know? And so you're making it, you're forcing them to see it from the perspective of the animal. And the interesting thing is, you see it after a couple of interviews with the same keeper on a few animals, the trigger, the switch, the light goes on. And it's one of those situations where once they see it from that perspective, they can't unsee it.
Interesting. Mafanwe. The EASA has had an accreditation program for a while, I think for at least 5 years. And how do you think EASA's accreditation program advances animal welfare? And how does it help your members reach and maintain good animal welfare?
Super. Yeah, I think it's really nice to be able to build on some of the discussions already today and in the previous days and in the panel, because I think for us as an association, it's all about recognising the needs of our members and then providing opportunities to support them, but not only our members, but other zoos that might not be part of the EASA membership. And so one element of that is being very transparent with what our standards are and providing best practice guidelines for species-specific areas of support to make sure that people are aware of how they can improve welfare in their animals. And so those are documents that are developed through the EASA membership but shared publicly on our website so everybody can see what level we're aiming for and where we want to go. And I think that's a great way to kind of help people, when they come to accreditation, understand what we're asking and be able to meet it. But also, it's kind of cued me in perfectly because I wanted to talk about the fact that it's the people. It's the people that are able to impact animal welfare in one of the best ways. And so within EASA, we recognise that accreditation is one snapshot in time, but once you've accredited that institution, you go away, and you might not come back for 5 or 10 years to do the reaccreditation, but the animal is still there and the people are still caring for it. And so that's where the people come in. And so that's where we have an EASA Academy within our organisation, and we have a dedicated animal welfare training officer. And so you heard us speak earlier, and part of Sally's role is to deliver training to both our members and indeed non-members at all levels, depending on the situations in those countries and the training that's available. Because we have such diversity in Europe. Some countries have really established keeper programs, degrees, masters in welfare, and then those people are very aware of the animal welfare needs of those animals. But in other countries, there's no such thing. And that's, I think, where EASA training can play a really important role. The other area where training can play a role is our Technical Assistance Committee. And again, we talked a bit about this before. And this is where we have developing zoos have a mentor from an EASA member to help kind of liaise with the director. So we're impacting both training at the keeper level and at the director level as well to improve that understanding and training opportunities for people to impact positively on animal welfare. And then the third element is that bit about, as kind of Nick was saying, you have to think about the policies, the processes involved. And that's where within our lobby work, we're able to kind of tell national authorities that are doing zoo licensing and zoo inspections that this is what you can expect from an EASA zoo, and lobbying and supporting that work so that if it's having a national inspection, in addition to an EASA inspection, we're all working from the same framework and we're all encouraging people in the same way to drive up those standards.
Thank you. Before I go to Kasumi, Nick, talk to me about what kind of training you do for your inspection team. if you would please.
Okay, yeah. So we run a bunch of small workshops through the region throughout the 3 years of the program. And the training, it's a one-day thing where the first half of the day is trying to help our members understand where we're coming from in terms of how to interpret the 5 domains model, what positive experiences mean, and ways of understanding interpretation of behaviour so that we can make a careful and deliberate finding in certain areas. And then the second part of the training day is more about the accreditation process. So we don't actually have anything in the way of materials that can sort of guide people through the assessment process without them having to go through the workshop first. Although that is something we are working on. So in future we will have something along those lines that might be available on demand in some form.
So Mfanwe also mentioned that IAZA, like AZA, has a mentoring program for institutions that are either going through the process or, in our case, maybe they've gone through the process, but right now we think there need to be some things fixed. Does ZAA also have any form of a mentoring process? And I'm throwing you that as a curveball because we didn't talk about that question before.
There has been, currently no, we don't, but there's been a lot of discussion for some time about what does it look like. We get this feedback a lot from the members. Well, what does positive welfare look like? What are we aspiring to? We're recognising that assessment is one thing, but the resources and the knowledge to help inform assessment, and we're talking about self-assessment, so these are members assessing the welfare of their animals themselves. We're not there to do that. We're there just to check that they've done their assessment properly. So we're the experts in the application of the assessment tool. They're the experts in the species. Some zoos might say, I don't know if I have enough knowledge or information to do a proper assessment of the species. So I think we might have some responsibility there to provide access to that information. And so that's a discussion that's happening now where we'll make available resources and knowledge of information. For example, and I don't know the scientific accuracy of this, but there is a paper that suggests that koalas like to use trees for thermoregulation. Not many zoos know about it. And that information should be made available because that's probably a very important aspect when you talk about welfare assessment of koalas. So things like that. So that's coming. Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to turn this over to Kasumi, and she is going to give us a short presentation about what they're doing. And while she is getting ready, I'm going to ask the two of you to think about barriers and challenges to animal welfare accreditation, and we'll talk about that as a panel afterwards. And you too, Susan.
Thank you. So I'm not good at English speaking, so I made my presentation. It's better to you to understand Japanese situation. So unfortunately, director is going back to Japan for the meeting, so I explain.
Is it easier for you to stand up here or there or where you are?
I can see it.
Okay.
So I belongs to Ethics and Animal Welfare Committee, that one. So now JAZA has 89 zoos and 60 aquariums in 2017. So first, I give you very basic information about our animal welfare situation. So JAZA established in 1939, and JAZA established full membership application review guidance on 1977, and JAZA established Code of Ethics and Animal Welfare and Branch of Ethics and Animal Welfare Committee as a non-standing committee on 1988, and JAZA made a notification of presentation using wild species in the zoo on 2004 because we had lots of problems to use animals for like a show in Japanese zoos. At same year, WAZA strictly regulate of acquisition of animals with suffering such as drive hunting on annual meeting in Taipei. That was 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So since then, we have a discussion with WAZA between JAZA about this issue. So, and then 2014, JAZA launched of the Ethics and Animal Welfare Committee as a standing committee, and since then I joined JAZA committee. So, in 2015, we have lots of things happened. Like on April, was a membership of JAZA suspended due to drive hunting. That is very famous, and I think everyone knows. And on May, JAZA member voted whether continue to work with WAZA or not. Then majority was work with WAZA. About 70% of our member agreed with continue to work with WAZA. And then on June, JAZA made a notification to prohibit of dolphin acquisition by drive hunting. And on July, WAZA membership of JAZA revival under several conditions. And then August, JAZA established regulations concerning the handling of dolphins. And on September, one aquarium withdrew from JAZA and WAZA aquarium withdrew following. And then 2016, on August, JAZA joined WAZA Accreditation meeting in Singapore. That was what you said. And 2017, on March, two aquarium withdrew from JAZA just recently. So that is so far our situation of animal welfare. So then in this year, so we will have an annual meeting in this month, 23rd to 24th, and I work hard to make new code of ethics and animal welfare, and this will be approved by our members on that annual meeting, and also we made new outlines. And so we will hold animal welfare workshop cooperated with World Welfare on July. We will very appreciate to this workshop. Then after that, JAZA starts to set up animal welfare checklist for self-evaluation and to start to consider about critical animal welfare components of accreditation standards, and also to create about minimum standards in captive animals, consideration of animal welfare, because now we don't have the accreditation system in Japan. So first we want to start our checklist, and then after that we start to make accreditation system. So then I think our potential obstacle is the difference in management strategy between private and public. So we have private zoos and aquariums, and also we have public zoos and aquariums. So they have a different opinion about animal welfare. So we need many discussions between them. And also we lack of human resources and funding. But JAZA will proceed as an educational way. So we will do director training with appropriate organizations, and also we will discuss JAZA's own strategy or action plan from WAZA strategy. So that kind of process we need to make good animal welfare situation in Japan, I think.
Thank you very much. And of interest is when I look at one of your first potential obstacles being that you have public institutions, private institutions, human resources differences, funding differences. I want to assure you that at least as on behalf of AZA, we have all of those differences in our 232 members, and I see my colleagues here shaking their heads that they have those differences too. And I'm channeling Chris Kuhar, who's somewhere in the room, and yesterday was talking to us about language and understanding some of the language differences. One of my big learnings coming away from the WAZA Accreditation Summit was we struggled for, I think, about a day with just the terminology accreditation. That is not a methodology or a system or a word that is used in Japanese. And so we learned that no, the more proper word is assessment or evaluation, so that you will see in WAZA terminology, we are talking about assessments. So let me pivot quickly, and okay. to barriers or obstacles quickly, and then I'm going to ask some of these questions.
I can be quick.
Okay.
I've got 3 points in terms, excuse me, no, I won't be quick because I'm clearing my throat, of barriers and challenges for welfare and accreditation from the global level. I mean, one is ownership of zoos, and we've just talked about that, which is terrific. The city zoos, state zoos, private zoos, and the governing boards. I mean, there's that real impediments to getting the understanding. We're struggling with this, so how does that structure work for zoos at the global level? Secondly is government roles in zoo and aquarium regulation. And I think our JAZA colleagues were particularly, it was a particular challenge over the Taji Drive fisheries in that it was government policy to allow those dolphins to be taken and in that manner. So that was a real challenge. So the government role, and we assume in our Western way that our governments will, from my perspective in Australia, very different perspective. So the government role in cultural difference and different regulation. And thirdly, in this social media savvy world, the Western focus on the speed of action. And from a global perspective, and in WASA's chair, and in light of the sort of journalist response we heard just a moment ago, there's a really unrealistic, though we are working on it, an unrealistic approach to the speed of action around that individual animal in that zoo in Bogor.
And Nick, I hope you're going to give me the opportunity to ask you a different question. You're prepared for this one, I know. You have been collecting data for 3 years. Have you found the collective data has given you any new insights into your members' needs, the animal welfare needs of the species kept by your members? You've got a lot of rich, robust data.
Yeah, we do. When we look at sort of species-specific stuff, there's little gems of knowledge, as we call it. One zoo knows something that no other zoo does. And it's something that it's a little quirk that they've just picked up through random chance, but it turns out to be some kind of species-specific behavioural aspect that wasn't able to be expressed in the past, but because of a certain condition it happened. And that information can be shared in that space. With the data stuff, we're seeing the trends, and we had these bar charts saying, you know, in a certain criteria, the amount of negative findings, the amount of neutral, the amount of positive. In some cases, we've actually found even scores between neutral and positive, and what that's telling us is we can do better in those areas. One of those, like a clear and pretty obvious part of it is reproduction. The opportunity to breed and rear young is constrained by the need to manage populations. So how can we get around this? How can we promote it? And I can give an example actually in that area. Managing a bunch of macropods in a walk-through enclosure doesn't have intact males available because it's a health and safety issue to the visitors. Now, when I was doing the assessment at the time, I said, well, in that case, social opportunities and rearing of young is a neutral score because it doesn't happen. And they said, well, actually, no, it's positive. They do get that chance. And I'm like, well, how do you get around this health and safety thing if, you know, you're saying there's a male in here? Well, no, actually, the male's in the wild yards next door. And when the females and the male show an interest in each other, we just open the gates. The females go in, they spend a couple of months with the male, and then they come back out into the walk-through enclosure when they're showing signs they want to come back, and that's where they have their joeys. So with little things like that, you can still enable the animals to have the experiences and the agency to do it. Like, they control that situation. And we just, with clever management, we can get around that. So there is stuff coming up.
Great. One last question from Mafanwe. So how is accreditation showcased in IAZA to the public, and what benefits are there of being accredited to an institution? IAZA represents 44 countries?
Yeah, we do, yeah. I think in terms of accreditation and showcasing to the public, and definitely the panel before said that we need to just tell that story a lot more and a lot better. So I think that's an area where we do have a different logo with accredited member on, so our members can demonstrate that they are accredited or not. Because we haven't completed a full cycle of our accreditation system, though, that can be somewhat misleading, because just because you don't have accredited status doesn't necessarily mean that you're not at the standard. It just means we haven't got to you yet. So we're kind of juggling with that communications element in that respect. In terms of what does accreditation, the benefits it brings to the members, I've got a number of them in the room, so I'm hoping I'm going to be voicing what you feel. But actually, I think it is, the feedback I get is it's that peer review. It's that ability to have somebody with skills and knowledge have a look at your collection and how you're managing your animals and your institution and say, this is really good, keep doing this. This area, actually, maybe have you thought about doing it a different way? Have you thought about adding it on like this? And every member that we've accredited has, found value in that process, found value in that peer review to help make them, continue to be the great institutions that they are.
Excellent. Please help me in thanking my fellow panelists, Susan, Nick, Mafanwe, and Kasumi, and I'm going to invite the next panel up here to join me. Thank you all.